Well, hello everybody. Happy Friday and happy Leo Zagami Day. Leo, how are you? I know everybody's so happy to always see you. When I tell them you are, they go, "Yay, Leo!"
Well, very busy.
Fan club here on Team Ara, Leo. You got a fan base here on Team Ara.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I always appreciate being with your audience, and of course, as you know, I've been promoting my volume 11, so it's been keeping me quite busy, and so that's what I've been doing, just promoting this book, which is getting a lot more attention actually than my last one prior to that, volume 10, which I still think is an excellent book, but at times, people seem to find Islam as a complex and maybe too difficult subject to analyze, even if, as you know, I gave a very original analysis of it. And of course, I always encourage people, before they can, criticize this or this other faction, to always go very deep into the analysis. In this new book, as you know, there is also trade union with the other one, because I also talk about 9/11 again, but in a different perspective. And today we are instead discussing a subject that, of course, we can reconnect with volume 11, which is the second assassination of Donald J. Trump, which, of course, nobody expected so soon, another attempt on his life. But there is a lot to say about it. And of course, also in connection with what I wrote in my latest book, because in my latest book, I actually wrote about NATO and what they were doing, and their cognitive warfare and their brainwashing, which seems to have affected also this gentleman, if you want to call him gentleman, this guy who ended up attempting to the life of Donald J. Trump, which in the end is a product of this cognitive warfare. If we bombard people with the idea that Zelensky is the ultimate hero, that the war against Russia is an absolute necessity, and then that Trump is the ultimate evil, people might snap, especially if they have been brainwashed in some way. And this guy, of course, we know the prior history. He went to Ukraine, and so we will be discussing that, but we will be discussing also NATO's evacuation plan, because the reality of the Third World War is daunting, and it's becoming more and more real every day. Europe should start preparing, I think, for this reality. So, especially for our friends who are watching us from Europe. I mean, Trump has rightly criticized Zelensky because, Zelensky is just after the money. He came here once again in America, money, 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 and Kamala Harris giving her full-on support. It's a demonstration that if we, as a nation, unfortunately, give the White House once again to the Democrats, they are warmongers of the worst kind. So that is something. But especially when it comes down to the last, of course, the news of the last few hours, everybody is focusing on what is going on in Florida, because that seems to be people without power, life distracted, everybody terrorized by this big hurricane. But at the moment, we have, of course, a lot of alarmism at time given on these weather reports, because they are part of the plan to then incentivize that cognitive warfare, a psychological warfare, never ending on climate change, which seems to be ongoing, unfortunately. So a lot to discuss today for our show and for our viewers, of course, with you, Chantelle, who are always a great host.
And you're a great guest. I always say I'm the hostess with the mostest awesome guests and viewers. You see? I really have cool guests, and you certainly count right up there with them, Leo. And,
I mean, if there is people, like you and your audience who are ready to receive the message, that's great. I mean, if there is people who really want to understand what's going to happen here, because the elite is programming something unprecedented for 2030. You own nothing and you be happy. We have been discussing also, commenting the prior the prior books I published, in particular Volume 9, and it's about really presenting a dystopian reality, which unfortunately it's also materializing very fast. So
Yes, it is.
we go to a
Yes,
big
it is.
city, like I just went yesterday to LA, and I see a complete change, and getting more and more dangerous. The cities, the big
Right.
cities, are definitely to avoid in the next
Yeah.
few years.
Oh, yeah. We were actually just having a conversation off air about that. And obviously, I think South Africa is probably, I think the last I looked, the third most dangerous country in the world. It's definitely in the top 3, right? And we were just saying, you know, I live here, and I've honestly, yes, I've had my partner being killed in hijacking. I know of a lot of other people that have had stuff done. But me, myself, they've never attacked me. I've never been burgled. I've never had any type of violation against me. But I know I'm a rarity, that's for sure.
You are a rarity, and like you said, you might be favored by the fact that you go with a certain vibration that makes it maybe for, because it is also about going around with a certain vibration. Because I mean, yesterday I could have probably been jumped a lot of times, but if you have a certain energy and a certain way of moving with awareness, sometimes people are too naive, and they don't really understand what they have around them, and that is also a big problem. It's not an age in which you can really be naive in any way or sense or form. You have to keep always a little bit of increased awareness, let's call it. So we will not fall into also this negativity that, of course, is pushed towards us, because at the same time we want to still live our lives. We don't want to go around paranoid,
For sure. And the only way, Leo, the only way, and I've had a number of discussions about this, especially, in fact, the last 2 weeks with other guests. I interview people like Caleb Jade, Jessica Jones, and they work a lot. Well, Jessica Jones with the cryptids, and of course these creatures that are now coming in through the portals and the realms and stuff like that. I mean, this stuff is very real. It's been going on since forever. All you have to do is speak to some of the hierarchy survivors.
But I mean, it was the same Book of Enoch, which, as you know, is a book very controversial. Yes. That was not really, I mean, after a certain age, it was not any longer in any canonic way used either within Christianity or Judaism, because it really tells you a lot of things about the origins of humanity and the fallen angels that maybe they wanted to keep on the side. But in that book, there is also a prophecy really in regards to the future, because these fallen angels somehow will be revamped in the end times.
Exactly.
Unfortunate, but it's true.
Exactly. And let's never forget, we are living in the most exciting times ever. Never before has any human being lived at this time. We are hit from every angle. We are under so much siege right now. And man, oh man, yet somehow we are here, and we are evolving. The way I see these things is they are giving us opportunities to evolve. It's like a skilled sailor. A sailor never became skilled by sailing on the smooth sea, right? He had to really sail over rough seas. That's how these guys are rough. We're practicing our human skills. We're elevating our consciousness. The more negativity they give us, the more opportunity we have to raise our frequency, elevate our consciousness, and then it's like they don't even see us. It's like our light is too bright, so they run from the light. Like, think about when the car lights are coming down the highway, super bright. Everything runs and turns its face away. It's that happens when we raise our frequency. We do the shadow work we need to. We listen to what we have to listen to. We're aware of what's coming, but we don't get consumed by fear. Because I think the biggest thing right now is that humans are being consumed by fear. Excuse my neighbor's dogs. They always...
This is to be disturbing.
Let me mute myself. I'll hand over to you.
Well, at the moment, we were touching also on Trump's second attempt to assassinate him, which, of course, fortunately ended up with the arrest of this guy, this Ryan Root, which, by the way, had a son who was then arrested in recent days for pornography charges, which is quite incredible, because apparently the son who was defending his father, who was basically saying my father is a great guy and all that, is now being charged with possession of an SD card holding hundreds of files of child sexual abuse materials. And in the last few days, we also heard, and this from sources close to me, that they basically, the deep state, the FBI, but also other agencies here in the US, are using pedos forums, even on the deep web, to communicate, because the moment in which you go in these forums, you're automatically then a pedo yourself. So you this is the way of shielding themselves. It's quite diabolical if you think about it, and so that also is a way I guess they want to protect their interests. And at the same time, we always find this link with pedophilia that is ongoing, with human trafficking. We saw what happened recently with P. Diddy. It's here in America. I mean, it's just these people, of course, seem to, that are on top, they are not happy with an ordinary life. They want something more, and that something more, unfortunately, at times it's of a criminal nature, because they seem to be like vampires who want to suck these young energies. And I saw it many times also, you know, even with Silvio Berlusconi in Italy. I mean, the guy was a politician who had at the time these bunga bungas, they call it, rituals in which it was all young ladies, at times minors. And of course, he ended up being investigated, but he died now before the investigation could actually be completed. But the investigation was procrastinated for years in a typical way, so they could protect. They always protected these people. I mean, Bill Clinton has never been condemned for anything. We don't know why Bill Clinton was with Jeffrey Epstein so often. And Jeffrey Epstein definitely didn't kill himself, and probably P. Diddy didn't kill himself, because that's probably the next thing that's going to happen. If you see, there is P. Diddy apparently who has a lot of videos himself, just like Epstein. They used these sex parties, orgies, whatever, with minors, with human trafficked women, and so on, and to film these powerful people, so they could keep these files for, of course, blackmail, but also for protecting themselves. And we know that there is the involvement, definitely, of Obama with P. Diddy. And so Obama is somebody who is protected at the highest levels of this deep state. And I don't think that anybody will be ever able to expose him fully, because they will probably end up dead. So P. Diddy at the moment is probably waiting for what they're gonna give him. You know, what he's expecting something. We saw also what's happening with New York, with the mayor of New York, who himself now is being investigated, indicted, because of corruption. It seems like it's either corruption or either sexual deprivation, but we never really have an elite that is sound and works with people honestly. It's a rarity, I guess. So here we are at the moment with, of course, more cognitive warfare to influence everybody on the future that needs to embrace more war, because the problem here is that we are going towards a third world war. I mean, if we continue, Putin has been very patient, not using any nuclear weapons. And suddenly there's not really that much talk about the Ukrainian invasion of Russia. How did it end up? I mean, it's like complete media silence about this, what is happening there. So it would be interesting to see if we can maybe avoid further bloodshed by having Trump back in the White House, because Trump has been very critical of this war, and that's one of the reasons why they really hate him. The military-industrial complex instead wants to continue. They are expected to actually meet in person today in New York, which is quite incredible, because this could have some repercussions. The fact that Trump has been so critical, but at the same time has opened a door and is actually meeting him probably today at the Trump Tower. Let's see what's going to happen. Zelensky has been described by Trump as the greatest salesman on earth, because he has got so much money out of us. He has basically bankrupted our economy and the economy of many other countries in the West. And all of this also with the repercussions that are very heavy also in Africa, with the flour and everything, the pesticides and everything that came also from Ukraine and from Russia, that has limitations now. So Africa is the place that is being divided a little bit. The spheres of influence are growing more towards Russia and China. Seems like America is losing ground in that continent. I can't. Yes.
Oh, sorry, my dog stopped barking.
No worries.
I'll carry on barking now. Yeah. Look, if we look at our country, Leo, the biggest biatch that has been in Africa has been America. They have been in here since the beginning. They have gone into all of Africa and have created these disgusting, what they call, there's a word for it, sorry, it slips, but walls. Basically, they go in and they say, this country's at war, we're coming to do peacekeeping. And what they do then, they send their troops in there, and then they usurp the resources. America has been doing that for decades and decades and decades. But then alongside that was Russia. So Russia was in here, the communists. So it was basically the communists and the Americans fighting against each other in South Africa. On our soil, the Russians and the Americans were fighting for us. And then when we went, before the ANC came in, the military wing of the ANC is called Umkhonto weSizwe, okay? They were trained by the Russians and the Cubans. Putin was in here in the early 70s with Cyril Ramaphosa, the one that's now president, right? A youngster still, okay, youngster. And then Tambo and all the others, right? Mandela, they were all in there and they were all comrades with each other. So you have the Russian lineage and then you have the Americans. Now, there was a big fight for power in South Africa. And now, if you remember correctly, in 1993, Nelson Mandela came into power in 1994. In 1993, a guy called Chris Hani was assassinated. Now, Chris Hani was a black guy, and he was of the Communist Party in South Africa. And he was assassinated on a Sunday morning before church in front of his 15-year-old daughter. And, well, that was not South Africans who did that, and neither was it Russians, by the way. So I'll just leave it right there. So he was Mandela's big opponent. But Hani was backed by the Russians. Mandela was backed by the Americans. So the Americans could not see power be lost in this country. So they will come out here and take out our high-value targets. They're called high-value targets. And so, but with all this fighting going on, China creeps in very surreptitiously, and now China has got the most power in Africa, and Russia is trying to get back in again into South Africa, which is where the BRICS thing and everything with Ramaphosa. But I think China still has power over most power right now, because everyone in Africa is selling out to China. Everyone. It's disgusting.
And China, of course, needs the resources that we have that are unique to Africa, and so they are gonna be just as colonial as America, even worse, because of course they are not exporting any democracy. They are exporting an ideology like communism, an ideology that has oppressed for decades their own people. And so, I mean, at the moment, it's all about, of course, the elements that they need to develop these new technologies, these electric cars. The Chinese have become in recent months the leaders of the electric cars by selling them really cheap. Even here across the border in Mexico, we have a bunch of Chinese cars. They are not making it to America because there's very strict laws in regards to all that. But as you know, to produce those kind of cars, you need to really take resources in a way that at times enslave even little children. We have seen that happening with mobile phones, but with cars, it's just as bad, if not worse, because you need even more material. So it's not really a green economy. It's a predatory economy, and but I mean, China. It's said
Cobalt, Janice, cobalt. And I'm just answering one of the viewers. She's asking because that's in the Congo. They're mining cobalt and lithium, but mainly cobalt. Yeah. Sorry, Leo.
No. I mean, China at the moment is really also trying to rebuild their economy, because their economy has had some problems. I mean, we saw they had problems in China for the last few years, so they didn't really make it yet to be as strong as they wanted. But I think that at the moment, China will probably develop, from what I can see from the latest developments in the economic sector of China, I think they're setting the stage definitely for becoming the number one nation on the planet. And if we have politicians like Kamala Harris, who basically are just like Joe Biden, weak in international policy, yeah, I think South Africa definitely will become Chinese, but I think the rest of the world will become Chinese. That's the problem here. It's not only a single country that falls under the spell of China, or a single continent, because we're talking about Africa, but we have to talk about Europe. We have to talk about the fact that Russia nowadays, since the beginning of the hostilities with the West, has relied more and more on China. So Russia's becoming dependent on China more and more. South America, countries like Brazil, countries like Venezuela, are also very much close to China. That China is buying ports also in South America, Central America, is trying to position itself, and it's really, I mean, way too close to America to ignore all the fact that China is the leading country. I mean, they have now created this fiscal stimulus to save the private economy. They want to stabilize the real estate market that went out of control, and they want to boost the stock market. So I think that China is injecting now a lot of capital into banks, and we have to understand that they want to save their the real estate market, the private economy, and they want to create all this, especially after this Politburo meeting that they had in China. Just yesterday, there was a meeting of all the various high-level members of the Communist Party with Xi Jinping, and they are this is the period in which usually China, every September, every year, they're pretty methodical, the Chinese, so you can always kind of know when they're doing things. Let's say when we are approaching the fall, China is working on their economic measures. And the Chinese government it's definitely working for maintaining their own economy and for expanding, of course, abroad. So the strategy is to stop also the falling of the property market and of course the real estate, which has been a really big problem within China. And then they have built these kind of ghost cities in Africa. You saw them. I mean, they are preparing, paving the way for a full-on colonization of Africa. Because when you are so many people, we're talking about 2 billion, and you need the resources, you inevitably see the world as your oyster, if you want to, yes.
Sorry.
So yes, I mean, they inevitably see the world as being a place they can deprade of all goods. And also, we know China wants to go on the moon, wants to go on Mars, and I'm sure that if Elon Musk wants to expand as he's planning in the next few years, he wants to go on Mars, he will definitely find the Chinese there at some point as a competition.
You probably found the Chinese already there.
Yeah, probably. Who knows? Who knows? So the Chinese have recognized they have challenges for their economy because they wanted to achieve a growth. I think they about to achieve a growth of around 5%. That was their target. But I think that Xi Jinping has also warned that many party members to take responsibility and innovate. Here we are talking about a country that, yes, at times we see as China as a great innovative country, but it's still backwards in many ways. And they are pointing a lot on robotics. I explained in volume 6.66, volume 7 and 9, which are my trilogy of Cyber Satan, how robotics in China will become soon the reality in every household, because they want to build an army of robots also. All this, of course, under the artificial intelligence. So I think that China is definitely expanding. I think that unfortunately America has some problems until we have these Democrats there. It's like, we know that China has been able to infiltrate left, right, and center the Democratic Party. And this is not just a matter of speculation. This is a matter of evidence. Spies who were found doing different things over and over again. They have always targeted the Democratic Party, never really the Republican Party. Now, we know that politics is always an illusion. We know that in the end, it's the military-industrial complex and the big pharma that dominated the scene. But they seem to target the Democratic Party because, of course, the Democratic Party is prone to be corrupted. As we can see here in California, you see, when a few months ago, the governor of California arrived in China, received like a rock star, going around going on the Great Wall. We're talking here about threats. They always talk about the great threats of war between China and America, this and that, and China with Russia. But then we see Governor Newsom treated like a star because, of course, California is completely dependent on China. And California has been in bed with the Chinese for over 200 years here. It's not just a communist thing. It's a thing that goes back to Chinese Freemasonry, the triads, the presence of one of the most powerful lodges of Chinese Freemasons in San Francisco in the world. The founder of modern China was in San Francisco before he went back and brought down the empire. So California has this really weird connection with unfortunately with China. So aside from, of course, commenting on I think that when China pushes the markets move nowadays. And it's like, they push billions into the markets like they're doing now with this stimulus that they're planning, and definitely something will happen. So this is my take is that at the moment with, of course, a weak United States who is not also taking advantage of their own energy production, gas, oil, like Trump says, drill, baby, drill. But of course, then we have to go back into NATO. NATO is a group of countries that, as you know, in 1949 came together after the experience of the Second World War. And NATO in 1949 created this alliance, which had a specific, I've discussed this in volume 11. I might have discussed it with you before, but the uniqueness of America was that we were not the only country that was not brainwashed or didn't have the possibility of being brainwashed, because we had specific laws to protect us. Now that is no longer the case since 2012, and the cognitive warfare of NATO that is supposed to fight China. But the problem is, we talk about here in America, enemies foreign and domestic. If we have traitors who go to Washington and then after 2 minutes they get contacted by some Chinese or some gives them money, and regardless of the political, if they are Democrats or Republicans, people seem to be too easy to corrupt these days. It's because I think the society in which we live, it's the only value that this society consistently pushes is money. There's not any other ideology that, it's all about money.
Always.
So who has the money now? The Chinese. Okay, then they can buy in South Africa, they can buy in America, they can buy in everywhere, and they can get away with more and more because they simply have the money. But we have also built this money ourselves with certain alliances, certain things. If we go back into the early 70s, the actual opening of the West to China was conducted by the Republicans. Today, the Democrats are the ones that are closest to China, but in reality, initially, it was Nixon and Kissinger who opened the doors of China for the rest of the world. If it wasn't for them, China at the moment would be still living in the economy of the medieval times almost. They were not a developed country.
So you're saying that Nixon and co were actually the openers, the door openers for China to invade, and
unfortunately, and George W. Bush and George H. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, who at the time was a very important figure within the Illuminati, who was sent with Barbara Bush to Beijing for over a year. And when he came back from Beijing, he actually became the head of the CIA. So, it's kind of like a little bit, these neocons also have a lot of skeletons in the closet, and in regards to China. If it wasn't for, I repeat, we can go on YouTube and find all these historic visits, Kissinger, then Nixon, then the whole thing, how it developed. But I repeat, Mao Zedong and the communists would have been left in the dust if at that time the Illuminati of the Bohemian Club that met in the Bohemian Grove in front of this big owl. And in my latest book, I in fact discussed the fact that on the 23rd, on the 13th of July, when there was the attempted assassination, the first attempted assassination of Donald Trump, we had the synchronicity, which is not really possible. If not, it's not a synchronicity. It's really a planned event, a staged event. They were doing the cremation of care ritual at the Bohemian Grove, and the military industrial complex, and those people who are basically the heirs of the legacy of Nixon and Kissinger, because Nixon and Kissinger were some of the most high-ranking members of the Bohemian Club.
Right, Brotherhood. Absolutely.
They were attempting to assassinate Trump because Trump goes against the interest of this system at the moment. I'm not saying that Trump is a saint. I'm not saying that he's perfect. I'm not saying that he might not have done some mistakes of various kinds, but he is a guy who at the moment doesn't fit their own paradigm. And so this is what they try to do. And then, of course, then we have the second attempt to the life of Donald J. Trump. A second attempt by a guy who is himself brought into Ukraine in March 2022, after the beginning of the war. He wanted to be recruited as a soldier, but they saw the guy will have last 10 minutes in a battlefield. So what they do, they use him as a recruiter. They saw that they could actually extract them brainwash him with cognitive warfare regarding all kinds of things, especially when it comes to the hate towards Donald J. Trump, the hate towards Russia, the sustaining this hideous war. And then, of course, now we have 6 phones he had in the car. Who he was communicating with, we don't know. The FBI doesn't tell us. The FBI doesn't tell us still those free apps that were on the phone of Thomas Crooks, who he was communicating with. Trump, just the other day, in one of his, I already wrote this in volume 11, but he repeated it in a recent event he staged, one of his many rallies, and he said very clearly, these free apps need to be open. And the FBI is not capable to open up these apps. I mean, how is it possible to not know such knowledge? We know that if the guy they tried to kill was maybe, I don't know, Obama, there will be, of course, Apple or all the other companies, they will work in conjunction with FBI to unfold all the people behind the possible, people who collaborated with either Thomas Crooks, who unfortunately then died, and not only died, he was cremated, so we will never know what he had in his body, if he had implants, if he had drugs in his body. We know that the Secret Service, as the rest of the Homeland Security and the deep state, including the FBI, they didn't give Trump the right protection that day because they wanted him dead. Now, the fact that they want somebody dead like him is because they want to simply continue with this World War III scenario, and that is very worrying, I think. And this guy, of course, this idiot who now has been arrested, he's not collaborating with the police, with the investigations, with this. There is, of course, attempts that Disraeli and Wesley Roth was definitely not alone in staging what he staged. I mean, you don't simply go to another state. He didn't live in Florida, and have a gun, and a gun which is basically a weapon of mass destruction, with the serial number obliterated, and suddenly you have, we have here the times of when you can find the Trump on the golf course and everything else. It doesn't work like that. There is definitely somebody also within the Secret Service who is a mole, who is giving such information out.
Right.
So I think that that is very sad that unfortunately, once again, the FBI doesn't do their job. I mean, since the beginning of the Biden administration, their only interest is to arrest those people who went on Capitol Hill that day and were basically invited in by the Capitol Hill police, and they went around. And now suddenly, I'm living here in California in a twilight zone, because I put on the TV and there is this a lot of ads, campaign ads, political ads. And one specific one was really hard to, it was like, that day on the Capitol Hill, 5 policemen were murdered. When? Who? What? There was one woman killed by the Capitol policeman. They completely lie. I mean,
yeah,
5 policemen were killed. No, I mean, some people say one guy had a heart attack after a day, another guy has a sick after, I don't know how many. If a guy now dies today of something related to he died, is also counted within the victims. But that is a lie. And so we suddenly have also a character like this guy who, at this Ryan Root, who attempted to kill Donald J. Trump, comes out of nowhere, but he doesn't really come out of nowhere, because he had been on an interview on the New York Times. He had been on Newsweek Romania. He had been basically more present than anybody that has recruited soldiers for Ukraine. So he had a very important role as a recruiter to be featured on the New York Times. And so this is NATO. This is NATO because NATO works hand in hand with the Foreign Legion, which is in Ukraine. And I explained also this in a recent article I published on leozagami.com, which you can find there, aside from, of course, my book, where I explain in volume 11 the cognitive warfare by NATO and what they're doing. And what is cognitive warfare, really? Because it's very important to explain for your viewers. It's not about psychological warfare only. Psychological warfare is addressed to a number of people. And the effect of psychological warfare is kind of limited. Cognitive warfare is much more complex and makes use of data centers, AI, and other forms of technology, innovative technology. So they go, they say, Chantelle, okay, Chantelle, let's see what we have on Chantelle. Now, at that point, we can address a PSYOP only for Chantelle. That is a cognitive warfare effort. And so they go on your computer, on your social media, wherever, and you start having things that flash on the side, maybe of your interest, that they have calibrated for you to draw you more and more into their reality.
Exactly.
And then, I'm sure they will not produce a potential assassin out of you, Chantelle. But this guy here was, of course, very weak, this Root guy. And he had spent several months in Ukraine. And it's not like if you spend several months in Ukraine, either you are fighting or either you are being prepared to do something in their recruiting center, in their brainwashing centers. So, we have with him a similar scenario to what we saw maybe with the second Manchurian candidate with Denzel Washington. The guy goes in Iraq, the war. This guy and then is brought back so he can kill the presidential nominee. Zelensky created this international legion, which exists at the moment, and at the same time, he's also recruiting criminals from his own prisons to fight this war against Russia. So there is like criminals, people that are
Are you saying that some of the soldiers, the Ukrainian soldiers, are actually prisoners?
Yes, they've been given this possibility. It was given to the Russians first. No, you remember Putin started to recruit people right at the beginning stages of this conflict when it expanded, of course, in 2022, and so they recruited, but that was Russia. You say, okay, Russia, they do this kind of thing, But Ukraine is doing the same thing now. So now you have people who are real murderers, real crooks who are employed to go and fight this war. And a lot of them have been used also for the latest military operation in Kursk. So they basically is like letting people out of the prisons and say, okay, go and murder the people in Russia, rape them,
Exactly.
do whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. And that just makes me sick because, you know, okay, I guess that can be looked at in two ways. Either, you know, these prisoners are now being put to good use. They can feel proud to be fighting for their country. And finally, they get to do something purposeful, because I think a lot of people who end up in these disgusting prisons really have lost their sense of purpose. Or, as you say, there's that lustiness that murderers and sort of high-hitting criminals have, right? They're generally psychopaths or sociopaths or of that nature. Now, put a gang of them together and send them off over to Russia. I mean, they're just going to be having one murderous...
I'm showing you one article just on this that came out not so long ago. This at the beginning, I think, of the summer. Just Ukraine is releasing 5 players so they can join the fight against Russia. I mean, but then you see the faces of these people. I mean, these are like rapists, murderers, drunks.
Wow, look at that. Come on.
I mean, it's like, I think we are definitely facing a crazy time in the history, especially of the West, because we saw these kind of things being done by countries outside of the West. But Ukraine is supposed to be the darling of the West, the one that is bringing us civilization, that is fighting for our civilization, that is kind of fighting against Russia. But another thing I noticed, Chantelle, the other day, I saw this, I don't know its name. It's a very young kid who goes around. It's like a blogger, interviews people. He goes around various countries. So he went in Ukraine and interviewed people about Kamala and Trump in Kiev. Okay. The interesting thing about it was what I saw in Kiev. Kiev was not the Kiev of the beginning of the war. The Kiev of now was like fancy people, all dressed up nice.
No, come on.
All night. Yeah. All the money that we're giving them, no wonder. I mean, we're giving them billions. The guys are, you could see that, I mean, even, of course, the youngsters who are not yet ready to go to war, so they have a great life there. They have internet cafes, they have this, they have that, restaurants, very fancy restaurants. And the people, the way they were dressed in the street, I was like, I mean, it looked much better than LA yesterday. It looked much better than probably a city here in America, because everything was very, say, okay, every now and then, we have this siren, you have to take refuge. But I mean, it was pretty shocking.
That's insane, Leo. That's insane, man.
Yeah, they're having a great life now. They're in the war zone.
But it's like, it makes me wonder what the real... I mean, there's so many rumors when you look at... and again, we speak to Jessie, and her main abuser was a guy called Michael Karkok, who was Hitler's ambassador to the Ukraine. I think one of military guy, Michael Karkok. And she has, and I mean, he, of course, was her main abuser. And she, of course, tells stories again about what was happening in the Ukraine with all the catacombs, the underground tunnels. That's one of the main tunnels where they're not only using it for nuclear weapons and stuff, but also for a lot of adreno harvesting. Put it that way, stuff like that. Do you know anything about that stuff? I mean, what's your take on that?
Regarding the connections of Nazism with Ukraine, or what is the specific question?
Yeah, just in terms, I
mean, the thing is this: when it comes to Ukraine, Ukraine had a very strong connection with the Nazis, because the Nazis helped them fight the Soviet Union also in their eyes. You see, so it became like as the Ukrainian identity was built 150 years ago, I wrote this in volume 9 of my Confessions, it was built by the Germans and the Polish Illuminati and their Masonic organization, but also various sects, which I explain the names, the traditions. And the Illuminati in the 1850s triggered various revolutions around Europe. They wanted to destabilize the monarchies and build more and more republics and constitutional monarchies. But at the same time, they were pushing for fighting Russia. Russia was this great empire, this great Orthodox tradition. They were pushing socialism. And so then we have National Socialism, then we have Nazism, and then we have the very strict collaborations with the Nazis that Ukrainians have. And so, but also the Polish, because we don't have to forget one thing about the Polish. The Polish, yes, they were invaded by the Nazis, and that triggered the Second World War. But the Polish also had themselves issues against Russia historically. And so all this in the end means that there was this very strong connection. And at the same time, mind control programs by the Nazis were implemented in this often thanks to the Holocaust, thanks to the concentration camps and the people they would find in the concentration camps. So the mind control also, Ukraine really has, we could even consider Ukraine the birthplace of occult Nazism. And I tell you why, because that is the birthplace of Madame Blavatsky. And without the Theosophical Society, Hitler would not even have used the swastika.
Wow.
So,
yes.
So yes. Dnipro was the birthplace of Madame Blavatsky. There is still a big quarters there for the Theosophical Society, and so people, they don't know that. They think, okay, Madame Blavatsky Russian, but Madame Blavatsky is actually Ukrainian, and without the Theosophical Society, contemporary Satanism will not have developed in the same way. I mean, when I discussed this in volume 11 of my Confessions, Michael Aquino, who was very much into the occult side of Nazism, he was also a member of the Theosophical Society, and he was very eager to talk with me, because when we had a direct relationship with Michael Aquino and we used to talk with each other, he was always very eager to talk about theosophy. So theosophy is really not that innocent. It has not only inspired the New Age as we know it, but also modern Satanism, contemporary Satanism. Without the theosophy, Aleister Crowley will not have had the same network of people.
Exactly.
Where he could promote his new hideous philosophy, religion of Telema. So
be Satan's little helper. Oh no, that's Michael Aquino.
Yes, but of course, then we have the mind control aspect of it all. I mean, you see, when in 1948 there was the Smith-Munter Reformation Act and the prohibition to do any activities for the mind control of the Americans, it was because they were scared about what they saw in Germany and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union first, of course, because they had Ivan Pavlov that worked on those experiments on conditioning, but later on the Nazis who experimented mind control techniques. And in fact, we know Operation Paperclip, we know bringing all these Nazis over, but not only to work for the future of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA, but also for the future of mind control. I mean, MK Ultra enrolled a lot of these Nazis in, to continue the same experiments they had originally conducted in the concentration camps. And it was monstrous, these kind of experiments. Sorry, Chantelle.
Sorry, I have very noisy dogs this afternoon. I don't know why.
No worries.
crazy barking going on. Do you know that I do believe if we go back to before the Second World War, I don't remember the dates now, before the Second World War, in fact, because they were the Third Reich, we're talking First or Second Reich here now. Hitler was the Third Reich, right? The Nazis, because when they came into, remember, South Africans, the Nationalist Party was pretty much German and Dutch, Hollanders, right? These are our forefathers, and they controlled this country. So Nazism has always had a big, big, big influence on, because the main colonizers here were the Germans, right? Including at the time Southwest Africa, which is now Namibia. Now, if you go back, and before any of this, the Third Reich and the Holocaust and the gas, etc., started, the Nazis were in Southwest Africa having concentration camps for the Herero people. They were torturing the Herero people in the same way they tortured the Jews before the Holocaust even came about, by the way. It's just shocking. And that's one of the reasons that Germany is still paying guilt tax to Namibia to this day. Germany pays Namibia guilt tax for that. But it's never stuff that is ever exposed, is it? This is all shit that is hidden. It's the same thing, like the Bush Wars in Africa. And they ended in 1989. Why did they end? When did the big German wall, the Eastern Bloc wall, get broken down? Was it 1989 or 1990? Why? Because the same funders who were funding the Bush Wars here in Africa couldn't afford to fund both. They funded the breaking down of the Eastern Bloc war as well. They have been in forever. They use Africa as their grocery store. It is probably the most underpopulated continent on this planet. When you're going, oops, there goes Leo, meter for meter, which is just really, really interesting. So as long as we know the Nazis have been part of this equation, yeah, you're right, Rosicrucians, etc., could go on forever. It's so true. And that's why I always say, when this has been an amazing, being a host on this channel has been an amazing journey for me, because you speak to so many different people, and yet they're all part of the same system, but they're experiencing it differently. Because in the main core, the queen, if you will, the queen bee, there you go. You thought you disappeared.
No, it's a temporary problem.
Yeah, but I was just saying about the secret societies. There's like this, the main secret brotherhood has always been, and every single other secret society is actually a vein coming off the main stinking, disgusting hive of a brotherhood. They will just package it differently. They might have different little rituals and ceremonies and flowers and colors and checkered little blocks and things, but they all bow down to the same queen or king. It's like that hive mentality, right, Leo? That hive mentality. It's terrible.
But you said the right thing. I mean, people seem at times to distinguish one secret society from the other, or the actions of one group of people from the other. But we have to understand that that's why I gave birth to my Illuminati Confessions projects. It wasn't really to only denounce the Illuminati of Bavaria, or a group that historically actually ended in the 1780s, in the middle of the 1780s, because they were discovered, but then they had to change name. And so there is a rich history there on how then the Illuminati developed. But the Illuminati are also the mystery schools of old that go all the way back to Atlantis, ancient Egypt, ancient Sumeria. And so there is a much more vast history. And like you said, they all come though from the same tree. So this tree that goes through the civilization, the ancient civilizations of Egypt, of Sumeria, and then goes all the way to it of course helps developing Judaism, Christianity, Islam. It's at times, unfortunately, the way they corrupt the individual is by simply infiltrating these religions that might have had some genuine revelations, or but at the same time, we always notice, and this is also what I shared, as you know, in volume 10 of my Confessions, with the book on Islamic Freemason and the secret societies behind eternal conflict in the Middle East, is that we are here witnessing every time a corruption of those organized religions, because anything that is organized is prone to be corrupted. Our personal relationship with God is a bit of more difficult thing, you know. I mean, who can enter my heart, my thoughts? That is another question, though, for volume 11, because then we see that modern technology is more and more sophisticated and might get into our heads, and then at that point we will not have the same freedom of thought. Once we start merging with the machine, the transhumanist takeover, as they call it, then you know, we will no longer have that kind of innocence, and the devil will be able to read our minds, something that only God should be able to do. So of course, a society like the Ukrainian society that is pointing everything on the AI, on apps. They are the first nation, like I explained in volume 9, that is pointing everything on an app that includes your basically, it's not only your IDs, your bank accounts, your everything. It's the basis also. It's a similar concept to what the Chinese have with their credit social score system, whereby if you don't behave as a good citizen, you can be punished because maybe ideologically you're not serving the cause. Now, this has not happened yet in the West, but I'm sure that in Ukraine, if they have eliminated all opposition. There is no, I mean, it's not a democracy, because there should have been a new election for a president and Zelensky is still there. I mean, it's a dictatorship. Right. We are sustaining a dictatorship. That is the truth of it.
Exactly. It's just interesting to see how all of this, it just seems so contrived, you know, Leo. If we look back over history and we see, now I don't know if you guys here watch Bryce's shows. Now, Bryce is a brilliant researcher. At the moment we're going into the Borgias. I mean, it's insane, because that's where it all started, you know, and we're seeing how over the eons, how with the politicians, the Catherine the Greats, and all of these, it's just the same thing over and over and over again, right? The same type of characters playing the role, heading up countries, or whatever it might be, you know, the positions in power. They're using the same techniques in modern day terms. And that's why we say, you know, the Cabal or the Illuminati is definitely not creative. I mean, they're Luciferians. They can't create. They just steal and they emulate from that. They've stolen our energy, and they've turned it all upside down. So all we really have to do is flip the script. That's all we have to do. But it's interesting how that is so ingrained, right, in society. The way the rich are in power and they bark down to the poor. And this is the first time in history that I think the whole world, not just the country, but the whole world is rebelling, right? What is your take on that?
The whole world is rebelling. Yeah, that's a big word, because unfortunately, Chantelle, most people are pushed in their everyday life to think about the most basic of things, like paying their own bills or arriving, living paycheck to paycheck. They are pushing us more and more out of that comfort zone. So we are not really in any way motivated to make any research when we are just simply trying to bring a piece of bread on the table. That is the vast majority of the population of this planet today. That is, I repeat, more and more pushed into a corner, or either they accept the wonders and marvels of this new era, the way that the media is presenting them, and they accept the great lie, because that is the great lie, the great illusion that they are presenting us, or otherwise there is, of course, some people who rebel, but altogether the awareness and these people who are rebelling against the system are still a minority. I mean, when in July 2024, and this going back to today's subject, NATO has basically, there is the discovery of a document that, a secret document, secret, it's no longer secret because now we know about it, that revealed that 800,000 troops will be deployed during the war with Russia, that support a huge number of weapons and around 200,000 vehicles, and the way that they're going to be moving from Europe and routes via Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and Scandinavia, and that everything is basically organized for this kind of scenario across all the domains, sea, land, and everything. Because we don't have to forget that the New World Order wants to eliminate 3/4 of the global population. And we never have to forget that, I mean, in the middle of the pandemic, the testimony of their will was blown up. The Georgia Guidestones, they were obliterated suddenly.
Who blew them up? Who blew them up? Do you know? That's still a question in my mind.
Now, you know, a lot of people said, oh, maybe it was somebody who was fighting the New World Order who wanted to eliminate that because it was, an ugly reminder of their plans. I think that it was rather they themselves who destroyed it to erase any evidence, because it was too written too much in plain sight. It was too clear. So
yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. It was, it was when human beings, what was it, about 2 years ago now? Not long after lockdown, everyone was starting to wake up. And
yes.
of course, the next thing, the Georgia Guidestones are blown up. I was like, no, come on. I mean, I'm glad they're gone. I think it's a good thing, but there was no ways that someone who was getting up to mischief would have done that. That was these guys themselves.
I mean, the investigations, and they even have cameras pointed at who did it. Allegedly, somebody who was putting there, of course, explosive, whatever. But there was never any evidence found or anybody brought in front of a court case, because then, if they made a big thing out of it, then the people will focus and start saying, what was written on them. You see, the majority of the people thought about this Georgia Guidestones as simply as an eccentric dude who went there in the middle of nowhere in Georgia, and apparently Ted Turner from CNN, some say, definitely with knowledge of Rosicrucianism and so on. But it was an eccentric thing that people could dismiss very easily. It's just an eccentric, But once the things started to manifest with the pandemic, especially in a different direction, well, no wonder they started to probably panic and say, we can't show them our plans any longer.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to eliminate it. Now, it's possible also that somebody who some patriot who had enough of watching this whole thing there said, okay, no, I don't want these things anymore. Here in America, we are fed up. There was, of course, constant attempts on graffiti on them, but there was also some times in which there was blood found on them, and so also the possibility they were used for rituals. So that was rather interesting. But at the moment, the plan of the New World Order is to eliminate, and so a massive war that sees, of course, NATO literally fighting against Russia, which will definitely at that point defend themselves with nuclear weapons. So, I don't understand all this planning by NATO, who is claiming they have, the expanding plans for several corridors, when they know that the moment they do something like that, it will automatically be nuclear weapon, nuclear war. Because then at that point, Putin will have warned us enough times and said, okay, boom. And the first nuclear weapon that explodes, the reaction psychologically in the West.
Sure.
That is in itself a psychological warfare, because then you will have like people panicking, watching these scenes of destruction, pain, and we're talking about nuclear. So that is not something that goes away tomorrow morning. It's going to last for 1,000 years. So, I mean, it's like, I am pretty worried about the fact that NATO is prolonging, like somebody is saying here in the chat, Ukrainian suffering. But that is also what Trump has said about Zelensky, and the non-attempt to try some kind of reasoning with Putin, or at least some diplomatic engagement that has been missing from the beginning of the hostilities, simply because Biden's administration has intervened and said, no, you can't talk with them anymore. So, I mean, it's
wow.
There's no opportunity for peace, and that is really disturbing, because, I mean, they all like to, these multinational battle groups, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, all this, and also the various Estonia, Latvia, which are filled with hate for Russia. I mean, I have been in Russia many times, but I've also been in countries like Estonia. And I tell you, in Estonia, once I was, me and my wife were there, and they thought we were Russians for some reason. I don't know, maybe the way we were dressed, and they attacked us. So, I mean, you're talking about a country which has a profound hate for Russia. And I was like, I went to Estonia the first time in the end of the 90s. I went only, I think, 2 or 3 times to Estonia. I can't remember now if it was 2 or 3 times, but I mean, I went the first time, and it was like, still, Russians and Estonians coexisted, partied together. They were not really enemies full on. There was some kind of, and I was working a lot in Russia at the time, so I couldn't really, I was like, why do you have this hate for it? Can't you just coexist in peace? And now but there was, the last time I went there, and I was actually guested by Estonian National Radio for a 2-hour interview. And aside from going there also as a record producer and a DJ, because that was another activity I used to have in my prior life, let's say. But I was also interviewed about the New World Order by Estonian Radio, and I really saw the hate for everything Russian. And so I understand that Russia has done something wrong to them, because, of course, the Soviet Union has done something to these countries. Countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they have suffered immensely because of the Soviet Union. But so have the Russians, so have a lot of other countries.
Yeah, so is everyone.
So is everyone. Yeah. But this hate, almost this ethnic hate for the Russians, yeah. I disliked. I was critical about it. I actually said it openly on national radio. You're doing the wrong thing here. If you think that siding with Europe 100% and joining the euro is going to bring you to a reign of prosperity and wonder, well, good luck with that, because it's not going to last that long. It's an illusion. The moment in which Russia closes the gas like they have done, the oil, and Germany's economy is now stagnant and going down the drain, the rest of Europe will follow inevitably, because Germany is basically the head of this Fourth Reich, because that's how we call Europe today, the Fourth Reich.
That's right. Yeah, Hitler was the third. And I can't remember the guy who originally came into Namibia. I'm just going, the First Reich. They called it the First Reich. I can't remember. Many years ago. Wow. Gosh, Leo, as always, our conversations are so interesting. And I just, again, look at the time. And I know we had to start early today because you got something happening as well. So Unfortunately, I can't keep you longer, but next month you're back.
Absolutely. You're going to be in Namibia or somewhere else.
I'm for the first time in 5 years, guys. I'm back to Namibia in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to be working there for a month, and I'm going to be broadcasting from Namibia as well. That is the place my soul calls home. That's for sure. It is beautiful. I'm going to take lots of pics and videos and stuff for you guys of desert and all the cool things we do there.
Amazing. Yeah, but before we of course we leave, I just saw the news that actually Zelensky met with Trump. He was apparently visibly agitated in the meeting with Trump today.
In his Gucci shoes, no doubt, shivering in his Gucci shoes,
no doubt, and everything else. Because Trump was like, I have a very good relationship with Putin. And Zelensky was like, yeah. So I think that we can close down today the show by finally discussing once again the efforts for real peace that have been conducted behind the scenes by Hungary's leader, which is also, of course, Viktor Orban, also known very much for his policies in Europe, which are contrary to what the European Union, wants to promote, this never-ending invasion of Europe. Now, regardless of what we said prior to the broadcast, the fact that in some way the colonial powers are responsible for what's happening with Africans wanting to join Europe, but there is a lot of countries in Europe which didn't really have a colonial past, who end up having, like Hungary, the right to defend their territory, and so I think that a peace plan that needs to be worked out now between Trump and Zelensky, in the eventuality that Trump wins, we will see an immediate stabilization also in Africa, as well as in Europe, and of course the United States of America. So I think that this is interesting. I don't know if they're going to let Trump win, unfortunately. That's the big problem here. Because there is a lot of ways they can once again work out some trickery. And at the same time, we have also the expansion of the Middle Eastern conflict. We haven't even touched today much about what's been happening in the last few weeks between Israel and Hezbollah and the full-on invasion of Lebanon. I mean, I've, as you know, discussed in very much in detail everything in volume 10 of my confession, and this eternal conflict seems to be eternal, so it never ends, and it's actually expanding, unfortunately. So not only the south with Hamas and Gaza, and now the north, and there has been the biggest strikes to date that Israel has conducted against Beirut, against the Hezbollah. Hezbollah is founded by Iran. Iran itself, unfortunately, it's founded by who? By Barack Hussein Obama, who gave billions, a whole plane full of billions, and who kept on giving them money also with the Biden administration. And we have Iran that is literally founding the terrorist organizations, the Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and whatnot, with their own money.
But Leo, what Jesse was telling me long ago as well, and sort of closer, is that the Illuminati, they're famous for their 13 bloodlines. Apparently, there's a 14th one that's now coming in, the bloodline of Ishmael. And that is Barack Obama. That's where he fits in. Barack Obama comes in with a 14th bloodline.
I don't really know much about that. I always felt that this 13th bloodline, which was Fritz Springmeier, I think's creation more than anything else, because when we go and study in detail the bloodlines of the Illuminati, then we see all the various royal families and everything else. Definitely there is the Ishmael faction, and in fact, even within the European orders, let's say royal orders, knighthoods, they created a specific one for that, for the Ishmael branch. Right. I mean, even within Christian countries, there was the possibility of this opening up to the Islamic, because that is really, when you're talking about that, you're talking about Islam, and there is no doubt that Barack Hussein Obama, in fact the name says it all, has been a great asset in the hands of the Islamists in particular, because he was the one who created with an important prince, Saudi Arabian prince, the ISIS. ISIS didn't exist prior to Barack Obama. ISIS was a creation of Barack Obama, and Al-Qaeda instead was a creation, let's say, of the Bush family. So here we can say that neocon and Democrats don't really diverge so much. So it's not about the politics here. It's not because Trump is a Republican. It's not because Republicans are not, in the past they have been just as bad as the Democrats. It's because Trump is a maverick, and he has a different concept. I mean, he wants to conduct this country as a business enterprise, which is great. At least we don't do wars. Who wants the war? If the only business of this country has to be the military industrial complex and the war, I mean, exactly. It's also bad. It's also bad, karmically speaking. It's also bad for our nation to profit out of the desperation and suffering of millions of people in other countries. So I think that hopefully Trump will manage to win, will manage to get back into the White House, and hopefully, at least for the moment, pause the efforts of the New World Order. But the New World Order is moving towards China. China is the head today of this, and is the dragon itself of the apocalypse.
Wow.
Thank you for having me on and giving me this possibility, as every month we have always an interesting chat.
Indeed, Leo. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to all our awesome guests, awesome viewers, awesome chat roomers. Leo, it's always so fun having you.
Yeah, so some people here so in the chat, Israel is Trump is Israel first. It's not a question of Israel first. Israel is the most Western and peaceful, if we want, the country in that setup, in which surrounded by Arab countries and Muslim countries, that unfortunately, I mean, if we want to side with Palestine and with Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and all the rest, in Iran, where we are siding with the mercenaries of the New World Order, because it's not about the religion. And I explained this in volume 10 of my Confessions. It's about the fact that the Quran is a brainwashing tool that produces barbarian results. I mean, we see it on the women, we see it on the hate for Christians and Jews. So to side in any way against Israel at the moment, I don't know if it's the best idea. And there is, unfortunately, a lot of people in the alternative media and stuff that seem to have that idea of siding against Israel, because, of course, there is the Sabbatean Frankists. Of course, we had progressive Jews that have ruined maybe and taken over places like Hollywood, and I wrote a whole book, volume 8, about it. The way they have brainwashed the people and stuff. But I think that people need to also understand the Illuminati have infiltrated specifically the religions. Sabbatean Frankists were the Illuminati, basically infiltrated Judaism. We have the infiltration of Islam from the very early moments of Islam, which I described in volume 10, and we have the infiltration of Christianity with the Knights Templars, for example, and the Crusades, who, I mean, of course, people would say the Crusades were a result of wanting to stop the expansion of Islam. But at the same time, the Crusades produced also a lot of negative results, and it wasn't. And the Pope suddenly, used the Bible as the Quran. I mean, they used the Bible as a tool of, you had to basically fight a holy war. A holy war needs to be fought against ourselves, not against the others. That's the thing, and that is the concept also, that in a way the lesser and you have two forms of jihad, the fighting over demons. That's the main war.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
And so if we point the finger and say, this religion is better than another, or this country is better than another, I tend to think that at the moment the Illuminati have conducted themselves in a way that they manage every day to divide and conquer, because they manage to divide. All of us are divided against each other.
Exactly, it's what they've been doing since forever.
And somebody is asking me a question that they will find the answer in the last chapter of volume 10. It's a thick book. There is a very complex answer to the Leo's opinion on the protocols of Zion that can't be explained with a couple of words. And of course, Chantelle, who has read the book, knows that very well. Thank you very much, Chantelle. God bless you all, and we see each other next month from Namibia.
You will see me next month, indeed, Leo. God bless you. Take good care, everybody. So good to see you. Have a beautiful weekend.